where my kids went and my grandkids. Yeah.
All right, good evening and welcome to the June 29th, 2022 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. The city is committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We have been collecting public input through voicemail and our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the start of this meeting. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way. All feedback is considered equally, regardless of the way in which it was submitted. Tonight, there are 3 public hearings. Individuals who want to provide testimony remotely for a public hearing can do so by calling 1-888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 714934, and that information will be provided during that time period as well. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they have gone over 3 minutes. Remember, you do not need to call in or comment live tonight if you have already provided feedback. And also, please do not repeat information already presented. Provide testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. And so with that, I will call the meeting to order and we will do our roll call.
Commissioner Padilla.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Commissioner Elkhire.
Here.
Commissioner Hayward.
Present.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Chair Agnew.
Here. Thank you. Next is the approval of our meeting agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our meeting agenda passes for tonight. Next is our special recognitions and presentations. So we have MJ here, to our community engagement manager, who will give a presentation tonight. Whenever you're ready, MJ.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me tonight. So one of the privileges of actually overseeing the boards and commissions is that annually I get to actually come to the meeting and do a check-in with all the members. And so typically we do a quick member review, highlighting some of those areas that we just want to make sure that we reground all of our commissioners in. This year too, as part of the administration work plan, my work plan was to develop a commission work plan guide, which essentially is a document that you guys can use as you're moving through your work plan development. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. Your chair and vice chair have actually already met with me and been trained on this work plan development guide, and it has been sent to them. I'm not sure if it's been sent to everyone, but if it's not yet, we'll definitely get it out to you after tonight. The nice part about the document is that it's not any new information. It's just a nice place that everything is in one spot. It's a moving document, so it will change year to year as it makes sense to explain content, and as our work plan development process or the template changes, we'll also modify that as well. So that's something we wanted to focus on this year. So a little information about how we structure our boards and commissions. So this is just a good reminder for our commissioners, is that we have council who's kind of at that high level policy and hiring and firing supervisors, approving the budget, ordinances, policy, really deciding the strategy, and that is really what their role is. How we come in as staff, we help with the operations and implementing that policy. We really are that technical expertise. So we're hired for a reason, like we have something that we actually are responsible for, and that is our job to make sure that that's actually being rolled out. For commissioners, your job is to advise council. And so really what we ask our commissions to do is to bring that community perspective and to share with council any of those items that you think are important that we need to consider when it comes to the community. We're not asking you to speak for the entire community. We're asking you to just be that community perspective. So council had picked you and you were appointed to this position, and how we kind of show the structure of our commissions is through a spectrum that we use when we do our public engagement, or when we use techniques to involve the community and get that community perspective when it comes to different projects, initiatives, etc. And so the spectrum is by the International Association for Public Participation, and essentially it goes from the left to the right, so it goes in inform to empower. And it's important for you guys to know where you actually exist on this spectrum, because you are a form of engagement. We ongoingly have our commissions in place that we continually are able to check in, and they're bringing that community perspective to us on a regular basis. And so left to right doesn't mean worse to better. It just means left to right, the more influence a group or a technique of participation actually has on decisions. And you guys can see that boards and commissions, we'll talk a little bit about task forces, fall in that far right. In local government, empower, the one technique that exists is actually voting, which voting is coming up. So here's how our groups are structured. So commissions, as we talked about, are ongoing, and then how we actually get that work done is typically through our subgroups and working groups. We also do have a fourth group called task forces that we do every once in a while gather together. You probably heard about a couple of them, like a housing task force. We had a street funding task force, race and equity task force, etc. So sometimes when there is a topic that really needs a good look, we will gather a community group together to actually take time to look at that. For you guys as commissioners, I think the important thing is to understand open meeting law. So it's down there in the table, abbreviated as OML. So as a commission, you guys are subject to open meeting law. However, our subgroups, so our smaller groups or our working groups, are not subject to that open meeting law. So that, and the whole point of that is that those groups can work a little bit more nimble and actually meet and kind of communicate a little bit more freely than we can as being that public body as a commission. Who they report to is also really important. You, again, as a commission, you were appointed by city council, so you are accountable to city council. Your subgroups and working groups, they are actually going to be accountable to you as a body. And so they work at the discretion of the commission. So when you actually decide to establish one, they're working for the entire commission as a body. Task forces sometimes are city manager and sometimes city council. So a couple key roles. The differences when it comes to, again, your staff liaison and also your chair, and then we'll talk a little bit more about roles when it comes specifically to the work plan development. But this is like the generally. So your chair is actually working with your liaison to help prepare the agenda, lead meetings and discussion, facilitate the development of the annual work plan, which we will talk about in a little bit, encourage member participation, and manage areas of conflict. Your staff liaison and other staff here, they have the less exciting stuff. They actually prepare those agendas and keep that official meeting minutes, anything that we need to keep as a permanent record. Again, they're going to maintain that and be that technical expertise for the commission. They also are your access to city resources. So if you're looking for another staff person or like a help from communications, they're going to liaison to those city resources, in addition to also relaying information to city council. So when it's time that there's something that you have that's going to go to city council, it's going to be your staff liaison that's going to make sure that that information gets to city council in the right methodology, and that they're sharing out whatever was the maybe recommendation from the commission, etc. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about work plans because you guys are about to start your 2023 work plan development, which seems crazy considering we're only in the middle of the year. I typically tell commissions it's important that we start this early, especially for you guys. You do meet more often than lots of our commissions, so you have a little bit of more wiggle room, but it is important to start thinking about next year's work plan now. So here is like how we do or structure our work plan. So it's important for you to know that you are a piece of the puzzle. So we have our high strategic policies, our vision, Edina, our comp plan, our CIP, and those strategic policies actually feed into our budget work plan. Our budget work plan also sometimes is referenced as like our citywide work plan. That's a 2-year work plan. That work plan is actually approved by city council, and our city manager is accountable for that work plan. From our budget work plan rolls down into our department work plans and also our commission work plans. As you can see, both of those work plans are annual, so we do those once a year. You actually start a little bit before the departments, but it's kind of happening in a parallel process, just so you guys kind of have a sense of how it's happening. So that's the overarching how we do that. Our work plan calendar looks like this and doesn't change from this really. In January it always starts, and then we hit June and August, or through August, and that's really when you're doing your work plan development. In September, or by September, you need to actually have that work plan approved, and it needs to be submitted into me because I'm gonna need to take it to provide it to council, and that's when your chair is actually gonna come and present that proposed work plan to city council. After that, there will be a staff review. We do this every year, so we'll take some of that feedback. We'll do our review. Your liaison will have provided some comments. We'll bring those back to city council and we'll talk about that, collect some more feedback, go back and finalize those work plans, and then submit them to city council in December for approval. So those dates that are on there are accurate for this year's process, but they change just a little bit, but the months pretty much stay the same. So here's your roles when it comes to work plan development for your chair, and your vice chair will support your chair as well, and then also your staff liaison. So your chair's role is to lead the work plan development and make sure it's not overloaded. The other thing that's important is to make sure that there are people that are willing to be leads and able to actually complete the work plan initiatives. And then again, your chair is going to come in October and present that proposed work plan to city council. So your staff liaison, you guys are going to look to Carrie for that technical expertise, and he's going to provide recommendations and advice. It's definitely a good idea to be checking in with him as you're going through this process and you're thinking about different work plan initiatives. We're going to ask him to give us recommendations to the city management that will review the work plans so that we can consider those when we're doing our review, and then before it comes to us and making sure that it's complete. So the liaison comments that you're going to see on the work plan shouldn't be a surprise to you. It's something that, again, as you are going through this process, we're telling you, like, check in so that you have an idea of where the staff is making connections, because there might be other things that are happening in other departments or on other work plans as well. Okay, we talked a little bit about our subgroups and working committees. I think it's important to be reminded, like, this is how we get our work done, and we make one small change to our work plan template this year that's related to this. But the difference between these two groups are going to be the composition. So your subgroups are going to be commission members only, and your working groups are going to be commission members, but you're also going to be asking for public members. Lots of times I get asked, like, why would we make a working group? You guys actually have successfully done a few working groups, and you actually have one established right now. But sometimes it's because there's more work to be done than what maybe the capacity of the commission has. Maybe there's another expertise or technical expertise you're missing, a demographic, a geographical area, something of that nature. That's when it would be a good idea to actually create a working group. Your only considerations on these two groups: you can't have quorum, so you have to have 4 or less of voting members. And then I always say student members, they count, but they don't count, because they just don't count towards quorum, but they definitely count. So the student members can be part of any of these groups as much as they want without impacting that. Okay, so this is what your template's going to look like this year. Doesn't look a lot different than last year, except for this one area, which why we spent a little time talking about subcommittees or subgroups and working groups is because we want you to kind of think about how you might want to get that work done. And if it is a working group, to kind of let us know it is a working group. Working group has a process behind it where essentially we want you to create kind of a scope of the work and have the entire commission approve that before we actually do outreach to the community to let them know that that you're establishing a working group. There's a 14-day period in there because we want to allow individuals to come forward and let us know they're interested. So we do kind of have that stopgap where we leave 14 days open before we approve all the members who are part of the working group. That includes, myself and communications, do some of that outreach, so it's really nice if we know about that. Sometimes I have people who call me mid-year and I happen to know they want to be engaged. So if I know working groups are coming up, it also helps us let those individuals know as well. Otherwise, everything else on here pretty much is going to look the same as the previous year. Your fields are the white fields. The green fields are going to be your staff liaison's responsibility. I do have like a couple of the fields with descriptions, but the great thing again is that there's a work plan guide that has every single field with a description attached to it as well. The ones to, of course, highlight, of course, are going to be that title and the deliverable. Be as clear as you can. The deliverable has really been helpful. We've been using it the past couple of years, so it really helps us understand what you're hoping to accomplish at the end of the work plan item. As you know that we do sometimes have a budget or commissions ask for some funding for different reasons, and it's the staff's responsibility to figure out if funds are available. The commission collectively decides, but it's ultimately the responsibility of your staff person to approve those funds. State statute doesn't allow the discretion of commissions to decide on budget and funding. Liaison comments, we talked about those. Leads. Stressing this again, it's important that you guys have a lead or leads in those boxes, because if you don't put anyone in there, it kind of sends a signifies to us that maybe no one is interested in the work plan item, and nobody may not work on it, and it might not get done. And then the other ones that are on there, those are also outlined in your guide, so we don't want to talk about all of them, but don't leave the white fields blank. Again, the white fields are yours, okay? So here's our philosophy when it comes to our work plans, our commission work plans, is that commission work plans are really commission up. So a lot of times I get asked like, MJ, what does city council want us to work on? Well, sometimes we may know a couple things that they're interested in, but what they're doing, you guys are on that spectrum, that you're in that collaborate. They want to hear from you and your community perspective of what do you think is important to be working on as a commission for the community. Every once in a while, there may be something that council also brings to us that says we want them to work on, or it's a priority, or if it comes from a different plan, we may slice and be able to put that work plan item in. But when you start your work plan development, it starts with you guys. It's commission up. So it's going to go commission, staff review, and then finally approved by city council. So this is how typically the work plan is developed over the next 3 to 4 months. You guys have some wiggle room again because you have a couple meetings a month. But generally it still goes in this order, right? You're going to brainstorm, talk about what do you want to work on. You're going to bring back that list, review it. What's your capacity? What do you think you guys can handle for the next year? Then start talking about priorities and who's going to be leading those projects. By September, again, you have to have that entire work plan completed, and your staff liaison will turn it in to me. So at some point, I don't know if it will be tonight after this, but at some point you guys soon will start talking about work plan development for 2023. Okay, so this year, one of the asks since I was coming to all the commission meetings was to bring some information. I think, Carrie, was this included in the packet, the climate action plan menu and memo? Perfect, okay. So there was a memo that we had our sustainability manager actually create for you. So there was a climate action plan obviously approved by city council, and we did an update just recently. Grace Hancock, our sustainability manager, came to city council and talked about how we maybe could get some of these items actually accomplished. That's when she also talked a little bit about how we're gonna ask our commissions to consider a couple of the climate action plan items for 2023. So really this is kind of an ask. We told council we're gonna ask ask you, it's an opt-in for our commissions. We hope that you guys will take some time to look at the menu that the staff created and then the Energy and Environment Commission actually reviewed as well, and consider, is there something on there that maybe aligns with some work that we could do or with our overall charge as a commission. If you do have any questions, the chair or another designee is available if you ever want to reach out to talk through something more easily. Myself or Carrie, we can make sure that people get connected, but definitely take some time to review that before you start that work plan development too. And really, that's it. What are the
Thank you so
questions?
much. What questions? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, MG. I think this is great. A couple questions that I had was, with this particular Energy and Environment Commission, for us to take a look to see what we could take on in our work plans for 2023, could we also work with folks from, like commissioners from the Environment Commission, and would that be a working group or a committee group? Because they might be commissioners, we'd be commissioners, but we're on different
Yep.
teams.
So we call those like cross-commission groups or like partner projects. We've had some success, some not as well. It's hard when we have groups of volunteers and we're asking for a lot of additional meetings outside of the regular meetings and also what they're doing on their work plans. So typically what we do is, if there is something that requires both of the commissions to kind of weigh in, is we ask one of the commissions to be the lead, but then say, we want this commission to review and comment on it before we ultimately do our final recommendation and send it up. That's one of the most common ways that we partner up commissions, and it has had the most success. So then somebody knows clearly, it's kind of like a role clarity thing that really helps with us, and we know who's leading so that the other commission can kind of follow. If you are interested in that, because this has happened to you as a planning commission too, that I think your name has been thrown in the hat on another work plan, it's nice to know these ahead of time so that no one is surprised. And what we ask is that if you're having that conversation at this level and you think like, it seems like maybe we could do a cross commission, is that right away we have that conversation, staff liaison to liaison, so Carrie could right away talk to Grace and say, here's what they're thinking. It might allow her an opportunity to at least talk to the chair, if not bring it to the entire commission to have, to get their feedback as well. So it's nice if we can know ahead of time, so so that Kate doesn't stand here that night and she hears planning commission on someone else's work plan that she didn't know about. So we really want to utilize our liaisons. Again, they're that resource, that back and forth to your city staff.
Perfect. Another question. So this was about ideas and how we get the ideas. It seems like the Energy Commission came to yourself, said, hey, could we get some other commissioners to work on this from different commissions? The Planning Commission is one. So that's how you got the idea. I was just on next door, just telling folks about, go to Better Together Edina for, seeing what projects that we're working on, etc. And I got a lot of great feedback. And some residents say, hey, Quincy, we put a lot of stuff on Nextdoor of things that we want to do in the community. Does the city look at Nextdoor to mine for ideas to start generating what these work plans would look like? So my question really is like, does the city go to Nextdoor to find ideas to generate
for
work plan
commission
items?
work plans?
Yeah.
Well, okay, back up. We can't see things on Nextdoor the same way that you can. It's a common misconception, and I've explained it lots of times in neighborhood associations because they think that we can see some of that communication. So essentially we are able to have a presence where we have an account that we can push information out, but the only information that we can actually see is if you, Quincy, comment on something that we posted, like communications or myself. We can't see any conversations outside of that. And I understand why. It's actually a rule of Nextdoor, because they are a private company, is that they didn't want other organizations, right, moving their agendas or like overseeing all the conversations that are happening, because the intention was that it was a tool for really neighbors, not really for cities. That's the way it started. And they didn't even add in the external organization function until years after they launched Nextdoor. So it still stands that we can't see anything that you guys are talking about. We can just push out information. However, if you, Quincy, see some ideas that people threw at you, any one of you, and people do this all the time, right? Because they know Lou, they know Kate, they know that you're on the planning commission. They're going to say, hey, wouldn't it be great to work on? It's good to bring those ideas back as well and share them with the entire group. It might spark interest in something, or it might be something that we just didn't consider. So I think that's okay. Again, community perspective, right? You guys are out there, someone shared something with you, you're sharing it with the entire commission to ultimately make the decision if you guys feel like it's something you want to move forward and work on. So I probably answered your question more than you needed.
It makes sense. It
Okay.
makes sense. I think, we could engage that platform, get ideas, and then bring it forward to the commissions to,
Yeah.
to look at.
Yeah, people, your neighbors are always going to want to talk to you, or other individuals that know that you're on the commission to share ideas, and that's A-okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla.
Hi, MJ. I have a question and a comment. My question is, you address the difference between the working group and the subcommittee and why there might be one as opposed to the other. How do you determine, or what's the criteria for outside involvement or community involvement in the working group?
In the working group. So it's typically, again, going to be if you have an item that you need more help than what you have sitting up here on the dais. Or it might be that you need a technical expert, somebody that maybe knows something in an area that maybe it doesn't exist here again, or sometimes it's geographical. Like Cahill's a great example, right? Like the only way to really engage individuals and have them be part of that smaller group was to design a working group so that they could actually go and ask people to be part of this and make sure that they had the representation that they wanted on that group. And then maybe other demographics. There could be multiple reasons, but the working group has a start and an end. So I think it's important that you guys recognize that. So they are charged with a specific objective. There's a purpose for the work they're going to do and a deliverable. Once that's actually completed, then that working group is dissolved and the work is done. And they work at the discretion of this entire group. So if you have a working group, again, like the Cahill, ultimately that same information is still going to funnel up to your entire commission.
So, but it's really not based on general interest. That's not a criteria. Okay.
No.
Okay,
No,
thanks.
it just depends on the work plan item and if you think a working group makes sense. HRC uses one for days of remembrance because they need more help, or other people that happen to have connections to different groups that might want to participate. Energy and Environment did one for Climate Action Plan. Again, it was a really big lift. They needed more people. I mean, your small area plans, big lift. Could just use some extra people.
Okay, thanks. And my comment is just that you did a great job on Juneteenth. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Bonnie. It was fun.
I have a question as well. So I was reviewing the items from the climate action plan that were included along with the memo, and there were just two of the, I didn't count, but it's like a long list of like nearly like 30 or 40 items. It looks like there were two that were potentials or noted as potentials for the Planning Commission, and that was regarding parking as well as the ADUs. And those are both things that are actively on our work plan this year, and hopefully we'll make a lot of progress on.
Right.
But I'm curious, given that we are provided that, are there other things within that list that we should be thinking about, either partnering with other commissions on or leading the charge on? Or was the two that were selected really the only ones that fit into our wheelhouse?
I was going to tell you to ignore that column. So if there is something else on that list that you feel is appropriate or fits into your charge, I would definitely say consider that. We might have two versions of that menu, but I was kind of hoping that commissions could look at it and kind of decide themselves versus us really trying to pigeonhole into what we think you might want to work on, because there could be something there that maybe you interpret, or there's a different way to kind of look at it with a different lens. I do think it's going to be appropriate that if you guys decide to do anything from that list, this is kind of an ask to Carrie, that right away we're having that conversation, because you guys said ADU, and I think that there was another commission too that had the conversation, because there's other commissions that are looking at the same menu, just to make sure that if multiple commissions are interested in a work plan item, then we would want to figure out, again, is it a cross commission? Is there a lead versus someone who's going to be a supporting group? So we'll definitely try to be paying attention to that as we go through this process. If you are ever, or if you're interested at all, most commissions are discussing their work plans right now. By August, in their work plan, or in their packets, their meeting packets, you probably will see some information about what they've talked about to this point. So if you're curious to see what's landing on other commissions' work plans, I've been advising the groups to consider going to check those packets out as well, so that you can see in advance.
Thank you.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda tonight is our community comment. So we'll now hear from residents in person who would like to speak about something that's not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. Do we have anyone here tonight to provide community comment? All right, seeing none, we will move on in the agenda to our public hearings. So our first is for a 0.9-foot front yard setback variance for 6116 Will Ryan, and that is being presented by Assistant Planner Acker. Please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The subject property, as you indicated, is at 6116 Will Ryan, and the ask is for a 0.9-foot, a little under 11-inch front yard setback variance for a front porch addition. The subject property is a 2-story home with an attached 2-car garage. This is how it looked not so long ago, and it's being refaced. The entire exterior is being redone. There is a proposed addition off the back, which does maintain all of the ordinance requirements. It's phase 2 of the project. It will not need a variance. So, but they're showing that their intention is to have an addition off the back. But currently, what they're doing is they're proposing a front porch in front of the house. The house currently has a small front entry. And in order to protect the stoop and have some protection, they would like to have a porch extend along the front of the house towards the driveway. There is an exception to the front yard setback that would allow an 80-square-foot porch. This porch is 96 square feet. The property owners were not aware that the design that they chose in order to have some protection in front of this small front entry and then extend it to the driveway was 16 square feet over the allowable limit to overlap into the setback area. So they are requesting a little less than 11-inch variance to allow for that porch addition. You can see currently it is under construction. They're refacing the entire exterior of the home. And then this shows the home with the new front porch in context with the homes on either side. And then here is the dimensions of that front porch. Here's the front entry, the existing entry. They would like to have some protection, which is a small overhang with columns, and then the extension off the side towards the driveway. Staff does recommend approval of the front yard setback variance. The proposed use is a permitted use in the zoning district. The proposal meets the variance criteria in that the practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the home and the need for weather protection and comfortable accessibility to the front entry of the home. The proposed addition is reasonable as it is a small in size and will not impact adjacent properties or sight lines. The difference of 11 inches or less than 11 inches would not be perceivable from the street. Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Their intention is actually to improve the neighborhood and reface the exterior of their home. Staff does recommend approval subject to the following conditions: that the survey date stamped May 27th, 2022, elevations and plan with the same date stamp. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have. The homeowner is present. And there was one comment on Better Together Edina, which was positive from one of the neighbors.
Thank you so much. Any questions that we have for Assistant Planner Ocker tonight? No? All right. Did the property owner want to say anything? No pressure, but. Thank you. Okay, if there are no questions, then we will go to our public hearing. So we will now hear from residents who would like to provide testimony. To participate, call in now at 1-888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 714934. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they go over those 3 minutes. And remember, it is not necessary to provide testimony if you have already provided comments via voicemail or bettertogetheredina.org. Please call in if you have new comments or information to bring forward. Before we go to the call, I will see if anyone is in person here to provide public testimony. Seeing none, I will look to our call lines. I know we need to give it about a minute, so I will let you tell me where we're at.
Currently, nobody calling in, but as you mentioned, I'll let you know in about 45 seconds or so.
Thank you.
We don't have any callers to this.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the public hearing has been closed. So I will now open it up for any additional questions, either for staff or for our property owner, or for just any general comments from my fellow commissioners.
Quincy here. So, if I'm not mistaken, the 0.9 feet of what we're asking is gonna allow for us to maybe just go beyond that 80 square foot. And it's gonna be 96 square feet. Okay, so the 0.9 is just to make it happen. Okay, so that makes sense to me. From just the designs, it looks really nice to me. It's a great improvement. You're refacing the front, giving it a very modern look, I could see, with the wood paneling on the driveways, on the garage doors and stuff. I don't see this as being a huge issue from my perspective. I think it's overall, it passes all the criteria, and it is going to be an improvement to the property overall. So from my perspective, I see this as a positive improvement with very limited, issue from my side.
Any other comments? I know I'm asking for comments, but now I have a question, which hopefully you may be able to answer. If this variance weren't to be granted tonight, what would be the impact, or what would you have to change about that, and what would be the potential impact to that on the front porch?
Yes, so originally I thought we were about 2 feet past the setback line, so it would have only been a 6-foot deep front porch, which would kind of been small to, stand in and have a few people in. When I realized, we're only 0.9 feet, I was like, well, I probably could have, reduced it, but I'd already put it on my application, and I was like, we have the plans for what it is right now, so, it's kind of the aesthetic of it. The dimensions are, it's 8.5 by, I think, 8.5, and then the other dimensions to get to the 96 square feet are actually the new stairs we're putting in. So we're going to take out the existing concrete stairs and put new wood stairs in that match the same decking and everything.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we have done our public hearing, so I would entertain a motion.
I will move to accept the recommendation.
I second.
All right, Carrie, does that work for the motion?
Yeah, we'll assume it's subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, your variance has been approved tonight. Thank you for coming in. All right, next on our agenda is a conditional use permit for Countryside Elementary School. And tonight, Community Development Director Carrie Teague will be presenting.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. As mentioned, we have a conditional use permit proposed here by the Edina Public Schools for Countryside School, located on Tracy Avenue, north of the crosstown, west of Highway 100. Zoned single-family residential, where all of our schools are located throughout the city. It's an aerial shot of the site as it exists today. Currently, access to the site comes off of Benton Avenue. There's no vehicular access off Tracy today. So what the school district is proposing here is to make a few additions to the school, highlighted in red on the screen, that would encompass 6 additional classrooms at the school. In addition to that, they want to address an issue about on-site safety conflicts between buses, kids walking to school, the parent drop-off areas, and provide a little extra parking. So this graphic highlights the existing conditions today. So the bus traffic comes in off of Stewart, and where Stewart and Benton come together, and move out the site that direction. Again, this is the only access to the site for vehicles, so also the parent drop-off comes in off of Benton, and they queue in the east parking lot. Pedestrians are highlighted by the orange dotted line, so you can see in this area here in particular, there's conflicts between the buses, the parent drop-off, and also pedestrians crossing in that location. So this is the proposed circulation patterns. So the parent drop-off would move to the north side of the school, through the site and out. A new access would be created on Tracy Avenue to line up with Countryside Road. So you can see buses would move in and around the site this way. So there would be no vehicular connections between those 2 parking lots where the kids can safely cross in that location also. The addition itself would be brick material to match the existing school. The additions themselves meet all of our setback requirements, so there's no variances associated with the parking areas or the building additions. In terms of the number of parking stalls required based on the size of the number of classrooms is code compliant. They're actually increasing the number of stalls. Landscaping. So as a conditional use, we try to minimize impacts to the residential area. So one of the things that, and this came up in some of the comments and Better Together, what can we do to better landscape and screen those parking fields? So the district did provide a landscape plan that did include some additional plantings. It's the more dark materials here. What staff has done is just added these red little symbols that indicate areas within the along Benton and Tracy where additional landscaping could be provided. So we're suggesting as a condition of approval that they submit a new landscape plan to fill in these gaps, and the plan would be subject to review and approval of the city forester. So primary issue for consideration, is the conditional use permit criteria met? Staff believes that the criteria is met. The items listed here are from the city code. The project wouldn't have an adverse impact on government facilities, utilities, services. It will generate traffic within the capacity of streets serving the property. There was a traffic study that was done in conjunction with the school district and our engineering department that does conclude, and it was included in your packet, that there wouldn't be any adverse impacts to the existing roadway network. Andrew Scipione from our engineering department is here. He's with us online. So if there's any questions in regard to that traffic study or pedestrian flow, Andrew can answer those questions. And the remaining criteria staff believes is also met. Again, this is a use that's allowed within this zoning district through a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit is triggered by the additional classrooms and the expansion of the parking. So again, we believe that, it meets all zoning ordinance standards and that the proposal would actually improve on-site circulation on the site. And with that additional landscaping along Tracy and Benton would help mitigate some of those concerns from residents. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings that were included in your staff report and also the conditions, again, that includes that additional landscaping. With that, I can stand for any questions you have.
Thank you, Director Teague. Let's go with Commissioner Alkire.
Thank you for the presentation. I noticed that in one of the comments there was some concern about increases in traffic due to increases in the program at the school, and there was an observation that the correspondent couldn't understand why the school district had chosen that location for expansion in an elementary school program. And I would note, and related to that most of our elementary schools are in similar areas. Probably all of our elementary schools are in similar zoned areas and similar traffic areas. And I'm not aware of an elementary school that wouldn't have some challenges dealing with increased traffic on an average day. So having said that, and since one of our residents has raised concern about traffic, I wonder if we would just spend a few minutes, not going in great detail, but maybe top-lining the traffic study, how it was done, what assumptions were made about increases, program-related increases, and why we're comfortable that it's okay.
Yeah, for that, I might turn to the school district, maybe as part of their presentation can go into the detail of what went into that study. And again, Andrew is here to answer some of that detail as well.
Okay.
Commissioner Padilla.
Excuse me, a few questions, and I think a lot of them might be for Eric or the school district, but you can make that determination. Part of it is regarding the traffic study, so I'll wait to that to hear that. I'd also like to know how many additional students. I understand that the additional classrooms and the need for parking is a function of two program changes. One for the immersion program that will start off-site, and I'm wondering whether or not the capacity that we're talking about is for the full immersion population, or just, I assume that we're starting kind of just at the beginning when, so I'd like an answer to that question. And what will be taken away on the, what's on the existing property where the new road will go? And I didn't see anywhere, I saw how many students are currently there now, but I didn't see how many there would be when it reaches new capacity. And I also have a question, because we're entertaining increased programming at Concord as well, and I see it's the same group of people. And I'm wondering, because we have step increases in both schools, whether or not that's because we are, as the Edina School District, increasing its capacity for the STEP program. Has the STEP program criteria changed, or is that a need that we're seeing across the community? So if somebody could address that as well. I'll stop there.
So I can answer one of those questions. The existing conditions map on the screen. So what would be replaced is this sidewalk up to Tracy. This would be where the new access comes in. So currently it's green space with that path.
And so is that not used at all in terms of playground or outside space walking currently?
Yeah, so I believe it's a slight slope here. I guess how that's used, another question for the school district, but I don't believe it's an active play area.
And do we know whether or not the additional students that will be attending will be walkers driven or bus riders? Do we have any idea about that?
Probably another question for the district, probably a combination of both.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Teague? I had one. We had an additional question in the comments that we received, and I think you did a really great job of covering off on most of them, but the one that I think that might have been missed was in the last comment we had received, really just seeking clarity on the documents, given that there might have been 2 curb cuts that were potentially missed in the latest round of the documents. So I don't know, Director Teague, if that...
Referring to the crosswalks that aren't shown on the...
So the comment directly refers to by pulling the berm between the driveways forward towards the curb, creating 2 curb cuts that meet code. It says, unfortunately, this change is not represented on the site diagrams included, and they suspect that it's a document coordination oversight. And so I'm not clear if there was potentially a gap in the document that was uploaded, or if in fact that was a change that was not created.
Yeah, I might ask the district to handle that one too.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions then for city staff? All right. Well, we will go ahead and welcome the school district up, I think. Is that correct, Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we will welcome you up.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Kennedy. I work at Wold Architects. I'm the architect for the project, and I've also got with me here Dave Ray from Bolton & Menk, our civil engineer, and Eric Hamilton from Edina Public Schools. So I know you had some great questions there, but just before we jump into those and address all those questions you have, just kind of want to back up, building on what Carrie said. Really, there are really 2 main intents of this project. The first one being to bring improved site safety to this traffic flow on site. It really is a best practice to separate parent and bus traffic, and we've already implemented that at quite a few of the schools in the district already, and kind of Countryside's the last elementary school that still needs that improvement. So that's the first part of it. We can certainly answer more questions about that if there are any, but that's really the intent, is to get parents dropping off at the main entry and buses in a separated spot. And then the second part of the project, of course, as mentioned, is additions. And those additions are to provide a Spanish immersion program at the building. And that will be, what you see there is the entire Spanish immersion program at its full built capacity. And then another kind of big improvement we're able to do as part of that addition is bring the existing ramp that connects the two parts of the building. It's a split level building. We're able to create an elevator adjacent to that to bring that up to accessibility and meet ADA code. So with that, I know we've already gotten quite a few questions, and I might tackle a few of the ones I know we can answer, and then I've got a couple I think we'll pass to Dave and as well as to Eric. So I know your first question, kind of why this site. The district did go through a really comprehensive process to evaluate their elementary schools and where a Spanish immersion program would fit. And so there's a lot of work that was done to land on this site being the recommendation for the Spanish immersion program, and it's obviously something the district wants to invest in. If you have any additional questions to that, we certainly could follow up on them, but I'll just assure you that there was a robust process with a lot of input gathered and of course voted on by the school board. I can certainly, if there's any questions related to that, but otherwise I'll answer. The current capacity is increased up to 750 students. On the average, the maximum capacity would be 794, but really the way we calculate that, the planned capacity is probably 750 for the actual number of students that would be there. And then you asked about the traffic study, and I'll kind of pair that with a question about walkers, buses, and parent drop-off and what that ratio would be. So we can answer more questions directly about the traffic study if you're curious, but in general, the traffic study really evaluated a couple different components, and it was done by Dave's traffic study kind of third-party traffic study division. But in general, they looked at the existing intersections that you kind of see on this diagram, the current traffic patterns there, where have there been collisions in the past, where are there potential challenges, and then evaluated existing traffic flow. Tracy Avenue is what we call a feeder intersection, so that report actually really recommended that if you're going to add any kind of additional capacity and traffic around the site, that's the road that should be used to access. And then the report evaluated what will be the impact of this project on the surrounding neighborhood streets. So they looked at the current capacity of the school in addition to the additional capacity, as well as if there were ever additional classrooms added in the future, which could be master planned kind of out to the north in this diagram. That would obviously be just a few classrooms, but they did evaluate the future, that'd be a 40-year capacity of the population and traffic flow that would be needed, and they really evaluated all those intersections again with the increased traffic and did not see, as Carrie said, a significant impact to the neighborhood. The main benefit of this really is coming from separating the traffic on site and creating two zones allows for a lot less congestion on those neighborhood streets. So even though there's increased capacity of parents coming to the site, it should really improve the traffic flow and the congestion you're currently seeing, because of course what they can control on site does feed into the neighborhood as well. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Dave, on the traffic study?
No, I think you covered that just fine.
Okay, and then the question about walkers, buses, and parents, I mean, the best we can assume is that it's a similar ratio to what they see today with the student population, and I know that was part of information we got from the school on their current population, and I believe it's about actually 45% buses, and then it's in the traffic study. I apologize, I don't have it quite memorized. I did a couple months ago when we did the neighborhood meeting, but it's the same. We would assume that it's the same ratio, and that's what was used to calculate the increased impact or potential impact of bus and car traffic on site. I think it's actually 65% bus traffic, and the rest is cars. So,
I can take the
do you want to take the curb cut one?
question.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Point to the. So the question was really what was happening right in here and whether or not these entrance drives met city code for width and so on. And that was pointed out by one of the residents at the neighborhood meeting. And we have since changed this on our plans. I'm not sure if that plan made it to you folks or not, but essentially what we did is we stretched out this intersection to kind of come right up to that cul-de-sac to kind of honor that true cul-de-sac diameter, if you will. This kind of gets a little bit wild in here because there's a little bit more pavement than probably is intended. So we did review that with that neighbor, and that met the concern that he was looking for, and that plan has now been modified. Like I said, I don't know if that made it to your folks' desk or not, but that has been changed since then. So.
Yeah, I think it's just a discrepancy between this version of the diagram and the plan that was submitted on the civil drawings.
Thank you.
So it will be built that way. And I know there was one other question before I jump to the one that I think would be better for Eric to answer about the STEP program. You'd asked about kind of how is that existing area where the bus loop that's proposed would cover on the site, how is it used right now? And as you can kind of see in the overlap here on the diagram, on your screens, I believe, or on the screen they're pulling back up, there is currently a pedestrian route from Tracy Avenue to lead you to the school. But obviously in this layout, so we are proposing to maintain that pedestrian route. You can see the dashed line still extends around to the south of the bus loop. So that's a safe route for students. It also allows all the students to get out of the buses on the same side that the entry doors are for the school. So that's, again, another really best practice for student safety. So you're really maintaining that pedestrian route. And we are, as a part of the project, also rebuilding the play area. But I wouldn't say that that area, due to its slope and its kind of distance from the main building, was not really used as a play area previously. So pedestrian routes maintained, and the green space really wasn't used much for play. Eric, do you want to take the STEP program changes?
Yes. Before I get to that, the green space that was asked about, we own a lot of property. There's a lot of green space below the building that will that gets used quite a bit. So the green space that we are taking away was a sidewalk, it was a holding pond, it wasn't used much at all. The playground that we're going to expand into will take over some of that flatter green space, but again, we own and use a lot of the green space down below the building, and it's obviously a large space. As far as programming to the school, I really can't get into and describe programming that's going to happen in the future or that is happening now. The addition is for an expansion into the Spanish immersion program that has been a desire for the district for many, many years, and finally coming to fruition through this program.
Can you address the issue of, and Ms. Smoke, I think it's SPED was what I was asking about. Yeah. Is it whether or not, generally speaking, that's expanding? I mean, is the question comes from the fact that we're seeing it in both proposals. So if you can address whether or not that's a across the district issue, or...
Well, I think it's a desire to create better SPED amenities within our buildings. And so at this site, to be able to create this room and to provide those services, the much needed services for these students, I think it's a real benefit for that community. We're also at Concord Elementary School, we're adding that additional room also, just also to fulfill that same need. I think that was your question. I'm not sure if I'm answering it.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Mm-hmm.
I might just add to that also that the special education spaces that are created are really specialty to serve like a higher need or a specific need student at each of the schools that's been identified.
Thank you. So I will open it up to other commissioners with more questions. Commissioner Miranda.
So looking at this diagram, item 2 is the pedestrian crossing where the students or whoever walks there is going to cross. Is that still linked for vehicles, or is that a separated space for students?
It is able to be accessed by vehicles, but the proposal is to have a gate there that can be opened. So what it will allow is for that traffic control to be there at the really busy times of the day when you really want to keep parents and buses separate. And then it could be opened for events, or if there are snow removal, other maintenance-related needs, or other safety things that you would want to open that gate up.
Okay, great. That gate's a great idea. Thank you. And so it looks like the percentage of students that are driven or walk to school is 35% from the traffic plan or whatever. Do we know if that's increasing or decreasing, or what trends are for that?
Well, trends are always a little hard to predict, right? I will say the COVID pandemic, what we have seen across a lot of districts is actually an increase in parents who are wanting to drop their kids off due to lots of safety concerns. However, I think as things evolve, we don't quite know where that will go. Obviously, there's a lot of hope that from a school perspective, there's a lot of pressure on a site when you have more and more parents wanting to drop off. So there's, I think, a hope that that will move back towards the number of bus riders you'd hope to see. However, some of that's also societal, right? And there's just some shifts in how people perceive their role as parents and things like that. And I guess what we would say is that number was based on like current data, so that would be based on maybe a worst case scenario in a way, because it was based on the last couple of years of bus riders.
Is the school district doing anything to encourage more students to walk or bike to school?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we always encourage walkers, bikers, and riding the bus. I think putting in more bike racks as we've been going along, we've been encouraging bike riding, connecting up as many sidewalks as possible, and we've done that throughout the years that I've been here. The school itself does walk and bike to school event days to promote that, and so yes, we're constantly trying to push that boulder up the hill. It's very difficult when the parents want to drive, but we certainly encourage. It's a neighborhood school. Walk to your school, ride your bike to your school.
Right. I mean, kind of to that point, there's a concept in transportation called induced demand, where if you provide a service, then people will use it. And what my concern with this, I mean, it's good that it's safer, but what you're doing is you're actually encouraging more people to drive their kids to school, is what this is doing. So that's kind of my concern. That's where I'm driving at in terms of, encouraging students. Because you can have a bike lane and a car lane, but if it's easier to take the car lane, people are going to drive, right? So I think it's something that I think needs to be thought about. I mean, does the school district have a climate action plan?
Do we have a climate action plan? As a district, we take the environment very seriously, and I think we're pushing the envelope as far as school districts with our solar, with our energy reduction, and so that's a constant lens that we have on all of our projects. So when we do this building, we'll actually be eliminating and installing or eliminating all fluorescent, and it'll be 100% LED. As far as the next building that we're looking at for solar, this would be the next building that we're looking at. The only reason that we aren't putting solar on this year is because of the additions that we're going through right now. So,
okay,
yeah,
I was referring in terms of transportation, because transportation is one of the leading causes in Minnesota for carbon generation. And so the more people who drive or drive their kids to school, the more carbon you're going to have in the atmosphere. So
yeah, it's very difficult. We can't control what every parent does. We can certainly encourage them to participate in the events that we have available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I might just add, and I don't mean to counter or argue against that point, and I certainly agree with investing in that. I know the district does. I just would also add that a lot of the point is to really make all of the transportation safer. So also for pedestrians and walkers, that intersection, as evidenced in the existing diagram, is pretty unfortunate. So the hope is that this makes all of the site circulation safer within the site, and hopefully isn't just prioritizing the parent drop-off. It really intent is to make all of them safer as a combined method of accessing the site.
All right, Commissioner Smith.
Great, thank you. Great presentation. A couple questions, kind of alongside what Lou was going after. It's more of what's going to happen in the future, right? As we make these changes, what's going to be parents' behavior or drop-off behavior in the future? So a couple questions. The first one is on that countryside road. With the traffic study that was done, do you think more parents would be coming from that direction going forward, or just what are your thoughts there? If that countryside is just going to have more traffic coming through because it has like a straight line shot into the parking lot, even though buses would be going there, could cars drive across the street and go in there as well?
I can clarify that and maybe we didn't make this incredibly clear, the only car traffic that would be allowed in that parking lot is staff parking. So parents won't be able to access that lot and drop off. So we don't anticipate, and we did ask for that evaluation, the traffic study, knowing there were some questions about that. We don't anticipate additional car traffic on Countryside Road or bus traffic. They don't think there'd be any reason for a bus to use that road unless they were actually dropping a student off who lived on there. And because parents are being really encouraged to flow from the north to that main entry where you see the blue dash line, our hope would be that we're actually pulling traffic for parent drop-off to that those north streets as well, which is the current route that parents are encouraged to take. The hope is that by improving that, there should not be any impact to Countryside Road in terms of parent traffic.
Gotcha. So it's really just like driving the parents to say, you know, take that northern route. That's your path. Staff path is the yellow route. Don't
Correct.
take that. Okay.
Yep.
Number 6 is a step, I believe, today. And I'm very aware of this because I dropped my kid off at Highlands. I pass by this road every day coming off of Tracy. Parents park their cars on the west side of Tracy, and some of them park them on the east side of Tracy. Then they look left and right, and they run their kids across the street, and then they kind of run down into that parking spot. Tell us a little bit more about, you know, just your thoughts on that behavior. Do you see that continuing, or would you have any kind of ways of preventing parents from doing that?
Do you want to take that one to start?
First of all, we don't encourage that. Second of all, the stairs are going to be removed in this plan, so those stairs are no longer going to be there. We will have sidewalk that will be encouraging the parents to have their kids use. Obviously, we can't control parent behavior, but we are going to have some crossing guards at Tracy and Countryside Road, so if they see that kind of stuff, they're going to call it out pretty quick. And obviously, it's certainly not a safe behavior by any parent to allow that to happen. So if we see it, we'll nip it, but we also can't stop everyone.
Gotcha. And yeah, I think you answered my next question too, which was the crossing guards. You're going to continue to have those crossing guards at Countryside, Tracy, then Benton, Tracy as well.
Definitely, and I think there's also was some great conversation and feedback from the neighborhood meeting. There might be some additional intersections to the north that are off this map that a crossing guard might be considered at, just to help alleviate some of the parent traffic impacts that are even currently seen on the neighborhood. And I know in some of the recommendations from the city review, there's still a potential that at Tracy and Countryside, additional traffic control measures could be added if that was needed as we move forward into this layout.
Great. Next question here is just on East Stewart Avenue. That connects to Grove Street, I think. Do you see traffic going down Grove Street, then taking a left, come down Stewart typically?
I think to our understanding, that's what happens currently, and that is one of the intersections that was brought up as a potential location that could benefit from another crossing guard to help with safety. But that, yes, that is kind of the route that parents would most likely be taking, depending where they're coming from.
So it's not usual for them just to drive down Benton, just go down come in and then just come out. They take Grove Street usually, and then come down Stewart. Is the general pattern. I'm just trying to understand, what do folks do today, and what do you think they're going to do tomorrow?
I guess I think we know that some of the parents are coming around on Grove, you know, based on where the main traffic patterns would flow from. Probably our best knowledge of it is just on-site observation and then understanding traffic numbers based on that traffic report. You can kind of see where more of the traffic, you know, they tested that at the primary times, school day beginning and start, and took actual traffic counts. But really what we're seeing here is, you know, we can control the traffic on site, right, and try to alleviate the congestion there. So that's really the goal of getting people off of Benton Avenue as well and closer to be able to drop off on the site.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything else to add on that, Eric, based on observation.
I'm just kind of thinking, as a parent, if both buses and cars are going down Benton, then I'm going to be I'm going to try to beat this and go down Grove. But now that the bus traffic and the car traffic is separated, I'll be more than likely to go down Benton to get in, to make that loop versus going down Grove. I'm just trying to think about the neighbors in that area might feel better that you're alleviating the bus traffic from Benton and pushing it down to this new off a Countryside. So it just might be a positive thing. I don't know if you want to encourage parents to not take Grove and say just use Benton, because now we set up this nice parent-only section for you guys, so stop going down this other street.
I think that certainly could be an option. I'm not sure that's really be a district decision on how much they want to try to recommend a route, for the parents to take. I know they do have kind of a map that they currently ask parents to try to take, and I think you hit on a great point that a huge part of the goal is separating the traffic, and when buses aren't there, there's less congestion. Should help everything flow better, even within the neighborhood.
And I think, too, that since the pickup point is kind of focused now at the main entrance, the way to get into that main entrance will be, parents will figure that out, which is the fastest way to go. It'll just naturally kind of settle into the correct balance based on traffic flow. So I think that's to be determined, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll just keep going for one more second. Sorry. I know this was optimized for safety, but do you think time, too, like the drop-off times would be shortened? And what do you anticipate to be, I don't even know how you measure it exactly, but how much time do you think you could shave off for drop-off with this new arrangement?
I won't be able to give you an exact time. I think there will be some efficiency with the bus side of this, because they won't have that cross traffic with the cars. And so just getting the buses to the location and getting them out as quickly as possible will help the other schools and allow them to get to their location quicker. So I think there is an efficiency on the bus side.
Perfect. And then last question here, then I'll be quiet. So we live in a kind of a crazy world now where kids are doing different kinds of emergency drills, right? You got a fire drill, you got evacuation drill, you got active shooter drills, right? With the additions of these new buildings, what do you think, does that impact the routes folks could take to exit the building, or have any choke points? Like I could see by the playground, there's a much narrower corridor in that little pocket there than before. And then on the north side with that other new development, there's a little bit of a corridor there. So I just don't know if you guys have also looked at what is your emergency drill process going to look like with this new change?
Yeah, I guess I can take the architectural side of it. Obviously, there's a code required exiting we're always looking at, but of course, as school designers, we're thinking a lot about school safety. And a couple things that are different in this. The new addition, that's the largest addition, that's a 6-classroom, 2 stories, kind of on the south side here of that addition, actually has some doors that will separate it off by code for fire. So that becomes a lockdown point. That could be a secure line, and then it maintains the hallway and allows people to exit out. So really that's just creating I would say a very similar condition that it's easy to flow out, right where your exit is, and a couple of the other areas you mentioned. So the first one you mentioned, which creates that slightly more enclosed courtyard space. There are no exits in the courtyard now. Typically kind of wouldn't be a good exit path for a lot of reasons, by fire code as well. But so that shouldn't really affect any of the existing spaces. And then that space has a door directly outside of it. It's a multi-purpose room. And then also the hallway is extended in a really easy, simple way out. And really not much longer than the current hallway exit from that portion of the building. And then the one near the main entrance really has the ability to very quickly access. There's just 2 classrooms added there. They can quickly access that main exit as well. So I think in total, you're not seeing, we're really taking into consideration safety and maintaining. We're always building off of those hallways to make sure you can get out quickly, as well as employing. There are a lot of other standards, which I don't know how much you want me to get into it, but we're using, hardened glass in certain areas where we have within the district in the past seen as best practices, and other strategies.
Okay. All right, it was just like testing to see if we thought about everything, but it seems like you guys did think about most of it, right? So that's awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Alkire.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I really am happy to see the separation of the bus and car and pedestrian traffic. To me, the big payoff here is safety, and I think it's fantastic. As a EPS bus driver, I'm really excited about this. The question I have is, I was surprised there were not more better together comments. And you mentioned a community meeting, and could you just say a little bit more about that? Were there a lot of people there? What kind of comments did they have? What was the tone?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to share that. And all three of us were there. The community meeting had a lot of, I'd say a lot of participation, which is great. I think that in general, there were a lot of questions about things like why there's additional parking added, and the clarification around the location of the access point being aligned with Countryside and off of Tracy was something that had a lot of conversation. I think it was a very valuable meeting in terms of being able to allow people to understand the why behind the project in terms of separating traffic and the safety that provides. We definitely had some conversation around the traffic study. As Dave already mentioned, that was where some really good comments from residents that are right nearby about how we could make that visitor parking really work within kind of good urban planning and design along that cul-de-sac came out. I'd say we definitely talked about how parents flow through the site, and from that meeting we kind of coordinated and talked through that on Tracy Avenue the school district wants to leave it open to that being overflow drop-off if needed. So at one point we were considering some other kind of traffic control measures on that, but right now we're going to leave that as still an option for parent drop-off if it doesn't, if it kind of needs it. I'm trying to think what else was discussed at that. Do you want to add anything, Dave?
I'll add one. There was one resident that voiced concern about, this intersection, and then the buses would jump right across and drive down Countryside Road. And I think we pointed out that when the buses leave the site, they go to their routes. They just get onto their routes because that's their next destination is in mind. And they probably would take the same routes out of this entrance or this entrance, not necessarily just all jumping across Countryside Road. The concern was how much more bus traffic was going to come down Countryside, and our response was we don't anticipate anything more than what you see today, that kind of a thing. So that was another concern that was raised. So anything else, Eric, that you can?
The only one we talked at length about, kind of like we talked about here, was just the traffic outside of the school district property and in the neighborhood. And parent behavior and that whole process. And I think it was just a fairly good, easy discussion. I think we had
like
25 people there. Pretty good turnout for an evening. But good comments. We reviewed a few things. We modified a few things based off those comments. So I think it was well worth our time and energy to listen to them. So
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla.
Just one more question. The cars spaces are increasing the parking from 94 to 110. How did you determine that it was 16 spots that were necessary, and are they going in the visitor parking or the staff parking area?
Yeah, so I guess I'd say how we determined it was that we know that already there's teachers who are actually parking on the grass with the current population. So there's a little bit of a pressure in the staff parking zone. So early on we said if we can increase that a little, try to solve that problem, that would be valuable. And then obviously with the ability or having more students at the site, it would be valuable to also increase the parking for that. And so I'd say we really designed it around the parking that seems logical while still working within the grades of the site. And so that's how we landed on the 16.
Yeah, I think honestly we maximized, we just put as many car parking stalls as we could, and the plan is the result of what you see. So wherever we had a spot that we could, without drastically going into retaining walls, things like that, we put some parking just to maximize that count.
So it was what the configuration could accommodate?
Essentially, yes.
So it's pretty much in the staff parking area?
There's
actually more added in the visitor.
Yeah, I would say so too.
It's kind of because the bus loop needs a lot of turning radius and things. The actual staff parking that was underneath where that bus loop is proposed to go was a few less stalls than what's there now, but there's more on that north area along the visitor. And that really will be visitor and staff. I think we'll end up deciding how to denote which portion of that is visitor percentage, and then staff can also park in the front as well.
Thanks, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, I just have one last question. I think this was building off of what Commissioner Smith was asking about Area 7, so where that new entrance and exit is coming out. Is there going to be anything other than, signage that's preventing parents from entering into the school bus and staff parking area?
Yeah, we'll have an adult crossing guard at that point. Not necessarily there to stop parents from driving in, but we will have a presence there. Obviously, we're going to send out this message. The principal will be driving this message home to say, this is how I want you to flow. This is where I want you to drop off. I want you to pull forward. All those messages are going to go out from the school before school starts, at the beginning of the school year, and reminders throughout. And so I think there'll be several forms of messaging happening around that one.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. I think that there are no more questions, and so we will go to the public hearing portion. All right. So we will now hear from residents who would like to provide testimony. To participate, please call in now to 888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 714934. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they have gone over 3 minutes. Remember, it is not necessary to provide testimony if you've already provided comments via voicemail or bettertogetheredina.org. Please call in if you have new comments or information to bring forward. So I will first open it up if there's anyone in the room here who would like to provide some public testimony. And again, please just start with your full name and address, and the light indicators will turn green once you've given your name, yellow when you have 30 seconds left to speak, and red when your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Tom Kleiss. I live at 5611 Countryside Road, the road in question here. I've lived in the neighborhood for 14 years, and while I support a lot of the changes being made, the bus loop, the expansion of the school, I do have some serious concerns about where the bus exit is going to be as it lines up with Countryside Road, for a couple reasons. First, as Commissioner Smith mentioned, he goes down the road often. There's a very large hill that you come across when you stop at Benton and head down south on Tracy. If you see where the number 6 is pretty much the first spot where you can actually see down the hill to where the buses are going to exit. It's a steep hill, visibility is terrible. They're talking about adding more landscaping that would additionally block line of sight where that is. Not only is the hill steep, it gets icy. So my major concerns with this is I would like the school district to consider moving the exit south down the property to provide more line of sight for those bus drivers and for those car drivers to be able to see up the Benton Hill for cars coming 30 miles per hour down a hill in potentially icy conditions. It's also difficult for kids to be seen when you come down that hill. I encourage you all to take that drive and think about when you can see an elementary school student when you're coming down that hill. So I'd ask you to consider the traffic flows. I'd ask you to consider the lineup of the buses and the visibility all in that area. Second point is the number of cars are going to increase greatly in the area. With this becoming a Spanish immersion school, which I fully support, the neighborhood kids are already going to the school, which means the kids that are going to be coming to the school in addition are likely not from the neighborhood. So your ratio of bus riders and your car drivers are going to go way up compared to the general population that's at the school today. So when you combine this exit, the additional traffic, the additional cars, the inability for parents to park by the number 6 and walk down that hill, you're going to have a lot more traffic and a lot more difficulty. And especially on my street, we already have people parking in front of our houses, which is no big deal. They drop off the kids, they go to school. Hey, that's fine. The problem is they're turning around in driveways, they're speeding down the street. It's causing a lot of problems. And I guess kind of as my last point here, Commissioner Alcreen talked about being a bus driver. The spot where the buses are supposed to turn left out of that existing intersection is very narrow. It's actually, the road narrows in that point. You can see it on there. Buses have a wide turning radius. I think there's going to be a lot of problems actually turning left and going up that hill based on the current configuration of this plan. So encourage you to look at that plan. I did attend the neighborhood meeting, and it was 25 people, a lot of very good questions. Commissioner Agnew, you asked about why there wasn't many comments on Better Together Edina. The street received the notice on Monday night that this meeting was going to happen. So I encourage you to either keep it open, get more feedback, because we have not been given really sufficient time to provide our feedback as members of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. All right, I see no one else in the room here to provide in-person public testimony, so I will look to whether anyone has called in.
Not currently at this moment.
Okay, we will give it 45 more seconds just to be sure.
We don't have any callers.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the public hearing portion is closed. I would now like to invite any commissioners to ask any additional follow-up questions that may have been raised, either to staff or those from the school. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, this is actually, that's a, from the public comment, it's an interesting point. So looking at the countryside road there, there is a walkway, right? When you cross over, and then you cross the bus path, you cross the road twice, right? So you cross over Tracy, at number 3 I'm looking at, and then there's that little walkway, then you cross over that to cross where the buses go, then you get into the parking lot. So if I'm not mistaken, what you're asking is if we could shift the entrance into that bus loop further south, right? So maybe south of that walkway, that might be better. And then, of course, there's that little lip right off of Countryside at the tip there where it narrows. I know this is not the school's item, but maybe if for the city to nip that off, you think, to make it wider? Or
I think if you move the entranceway 50 feet to the south, 100 feet to the south,
then it wouldn't matter.
The school's property,
Okay.
that would allow better visibility for turning left, especially with the visibility on the hill.
Yep.
And that part of Tracy is wider already.
Yep.
It doesn't have the nip in. And you also don't have a direct land at the countryside road, so less likelihood of a bus if he can't turn left because he's been waiting 10 minutes or 5 minutes because of all the traffic. They don't have the ability to pull through because that's going to be the quickest way for them to alleviate the traffic there is going straight.
Is there a question you'd like to direct towards the school?
Yeah,
Related to that?
Is it possible to shift the entrance, that bus loop 50 feet south? Is that part of the school's property? Is that even possible?
I'll take a shot at it. My concern would be, and maybe I'm voicing a concern on behalf of engineering department in your city, is having the driveways not, or the entrance drive not aligned with Countryside now introduces a kind of an offset intersection, and I know that, well, at least I've heard, Benton with the jog creates a kind of unusual intersection of who goes first and that sort of a thing. And the concern would be, are we creating another situation like that? So we did work closely with engineering staff on locating that entrance and working on that intersection as far as where that should be placed. This is the result of that coordination. Is it possible? I don't know. I guess I would defer to your engineering department to see if that's something that would be possible on their side.
No, that's a really good point, actually. That offset of Benton on east and west is so tricky when cars try to go down the other side of Benton from one side. You have to kind of pause to see, what they're gonna do, and you kind of try to figure that out. That might create a second problem.
If I could just address the question about sightlines as well, because I think that's a little intertwined with this. We realize that there is a hill, and that is something that, of course, we can't change in any way in terms of the grade of the existing road. However, when buses leave this lot, the plan is, and this is kind of a typical best practice within the district on other sites too, I know they've already implemented, is that the buses would all leave at one time, so the traffic would actually be stopped to the north and the south, so that hopefully would really minimize the risk of any buses that need to turn left, not seeing someone, because it would be the crossing guards are stopping other traffic and letting those buses all go at once. So it's really just kind of a one, within 5 minutes, they're all out of the lot. So I just wanted to clarify that on the sightline part of it.
And that occurs one time in the afternoon for about a minute and a half. I mean, if they stop traffic, the buses flow out really quickly. And that's where we talked about efficiencies, that's where that efficiency would come through, is that they would flow safely out of that lot very quickly.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming back up. And thank you for your presentation. So I will open it up to any comments that folks would like to provide, and then potentially a motion as well.
Yeah.
Would you like to start with comments?
Comment, yeah, just a comment. I think, overall the idea is absolutely a good idea, separating the two loops, parent drop-off and buses. I'm just looking at this again and looking at the walking path for the crossing guards that would be on the south of Tracy. They'd have to make sure that not only do the kids cross the street on Tracy correctly, but also cross the bus path if there's a lot of traffic there. So it just seems like that's a little bit of an awkward spot. Actually, yeah. So, but I think overall it's a good plan. The slope definitely is something that it would be really hard to change the grading of the street, of course, and certainly moving that entrance into the bus loop to be offset with Countryside would create a similar problem with Benton on the north, and I know that's a problem. I know there's like 2 potential accidents there, and that might create even more. So this might be the best that could be done in this area, given the layout. So I'm just trying to think through if there's anything else that could be done that could improve it. But the offsetting of the streets definitely, I know, is a challenge. And the lip that exists on the south side of, on the north side of Countryside there, right on Tracy, that could be looked at, of how you could widen that a little bit, so the buses, when they make the left turn, could be not as much of a choke point. So,
Thank you. I think overall, I'm really excited to see this coming together. I'm excited about the immersion program, and I think there's a lot of intentionality that went into this. I also see the ways in which safety is prioritized, which obviously around a school is of utmost importance. Usually I am someone who is not a fan of seeing the additional parking. And I think that Commissioner Miranda, your questions around what can we do as a community to encourage other modes of transportation, I think is really important, and something, and I don't even know, I'm thinking about our work plan, right? And how are there ways that we could work with either the Transportation Commission or something like that to really be intentional about how are we encouraging that across the board. But I think hearing that there are staff members parking in the grass right now is one of those things of parking should be right-sized. And right now there does seem to be a mismatch if there are staff members parking in the grass. And my instinct is always like, well, mass transit. Well, I'm guessing that there's not a lot of mass transit that goes into the middle of this neighborhood, right? And walkable and bikeable, but I would also question what could we do to bring staff closer into that direct area in the short amount of time from a living perspective is just harder and outside of the scope of what I think we can do within our immediate future. So I know that there are a lot of considerations. I appreciate the public testimony and the discussion around what does safety look like on this street. And I think in even hearing Commissioner Smith reflect on, his troubleshooting of where could this street exit, I think it is there are a lot of complicating factors because aligning it to the street does make sense. You could definitely see an argument for bringing it further south to increase those sight lines. But then I think the further south you go to, the more of a tight curve those buses are going to have to take to go further up, and you're just losing more and more green space. And so I do trust that the architect and the experts really looked at a lot of options, and this was the best option on the table. So overall, I am supportive of this. Commissioner Padilla.
Yes, I would concur that by and large, these are great additions and great suggestions, and it's great to have an immersion school and absolutely separating out bus flow of traffic from students. I think it's a huge safety addition. I do have concerns about this turn, now that it was pointed out, onto the one part of the street for the buses, onto the one part of the street where it's very narrow. So I would like to see an accommodation there for that private property, I guess, that juts out into the street. And I don't know what kind of possible options there are other than possibly moving that driveway to the south. I don't know if an easement is a possibility. The other thing, as long as we're increasing the parking, can we suggest, along with the suggestion about the landscaping, that there's EV stations? I mean, I would like to see that. That's a suggestion whenever we're putting in new parking anywhere, that we add EV stations as well, not necessarily for the parents, but for the staff and anybody and visitors. So,
thank you. Commissioner Alkire.
Yes, just a couple things. Overall, very delighted by this project. A couple of points on buses. I don't think there's any need to be concerned about the turning radius going from the bus parking lot left on Tracy. It's just not that bad. It is narrower there than it is, 50 feet to the north and 50 feet to the south, but it's not. It doesn't look like a problem to me, and I'm sure the school district can sort that out. With regard to additional traffic on Countryside going east, I'd be surprised. I can't tell the future, but I'd be surprised just because Countryside really doesn't go anywhere. And the bus drivers don't want to go someplace that doesn't go anywhere. And if it did become a problem, the school district can very easily tell the transportation department that buses can't go there unless they're dropping somebody off. So I think that's certainly manageable with the district over time. I really appreciate the comments on visibility, particularly southbound on Tracy. To me, it doesn't seem incremental. It doesn't seem marginally better or worse than it is today. We still have a crosswalk in that spot, and traffic still comes to the north down that hill to that spot. Visibility is always a concern, but I don't see the visibility getting incrementally worse in this scenario. So, surely something for us all to be aware of, but I don't see that as a reason to, I don't perceive that as a reason to change the direction of this project. So overall, I'm just very supportive of conditional use permit for this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Alkire. Commissioner Miranda.
So I want to agree with those who say that this is a great thing the district is doing for this immersion school. My partner's daughters, who are adults now, were in the French immersion school when it opened, and it has been a fantastic influence on their lives. So I applaud the district for the initiative. But I think if there's any institution in the city of Edina that should be working to improve climate change outcomes, for future Edina residents, I think it's the school district. And I'm very disappointed that the district is really only considering current safety and not the future of students who will be living in a world where climate change impacts are getting worse every year. It's disingenuous to say that we're improving safety for all modes when we're really just encouraging more parents to drive. The latest UN IPCC reports issued this year talk about policymakers enacting transformational change, and this is not that. I'm voting against this because it doesn't meet the following requirements of the conditional use permit. Number 3, does not have an undue adverse impact on the public health, safety, and welfare, primarily because of climate change. And 6 is consistent with the comprehensive plan because Chapter 8, Energy and Environment, talks about the city missing its 2015 climate action goals, and we have a new climate action plan with even more aggressive goals. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Any additional comments? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I provide a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Countryside Elementary School.
Can I ask a quick question?
Do you want to ask a question about the motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would it depend on the tree planting study for us to approve?
Yes, so that's listed in the conditions. So I'm assuming, again, that motion was subject to the findings and conditions that are in the staff report, and that would include the landscaping.
Perfect. Then I second the motion.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or questions?
Can we add to the motion EV stations?
I think you can make an amendment to a motion, but this is where my Robert's rules are testing their limits.
You can. If I could comment on that, with a conditional use permit, you can tie conditions where there's a nexus to the project, screening to mitigate impacts. Requiring an EV station, if the applicant, if they're agreeable to it, we can certainly add that condition. But I'm not sure it's reducing impacts to the conditional use permit. If we can draw that nexus between the two, I'm not sure.
I could see that for that one in particular, given Commissioner Miranda's tying it to health due to climate, that would be a potential tie-in. I will ask Director Teague for you to advise on how we would add an amendment to the motion if that's what we would like to do.
Yes, so Commissioner Padilla could ask Commissioner Alkire for a friendly amendment to the motion to add that condition.
Commissioner Alkire, can we have a friendly amendment to add the EVs to the conditional use permit?
So that would mean that the motion is supporting the conditional use permit only if EVs are added.
I think the ask is, would you be willing to accept that added condition to the current motion?
Well, how many? I mean, to me, this opens up a whole can of worms. We're going to add EV stations. Great. How many? Let's say it's 3. Well, why is it 3? Does the school district need 3? Maybe they need 1. Maybe they need 20. I don't know. That would be my concern about just.
No, I
throwing that
understand
in there.
exactly what you're saying, and I don't know, but I have in front at the beginning of all my notes is the climate action plan.
Sure. No, totally agree.
So it just seems to me like to not address it in any form, and I understand we have all these rules and that we need to work within, but I feel as though we're not doing our jobs if we don't address it in some form or another. But I haven't answered your question. I don't know what kind of things we're looking for. I don't know what these other working groups, everything we addressed at the beginning of the meeting that we're talking about in terms of what standards are we working toward in terms of for X amount of parking spaces, how many EV stations will we at some point soon in the future be requiring? I don't have any answers. I don't know. I would just like to see us not increase parking without regard to hoping that some of those are EVs. So I don't know, 2. I don't know. It's an arbitrary number. Do we just for sake of getting through procedures, do we just come up with a number? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I would make the recommendation that, the addition that we make be to request that they strongly consider and provide our feedback here to the school board that would be really important to us, given the climate action plan that we do have in place, but not necessarily say it is contingent on a specific number, would be my recommendation.
That makes sense.
Would you accept that friendly amendment?
Yes.
And Commissioner Smith, I think we also have to get him to accept it as a seconder.
Yes, I second that motion.
All right, thank you. And thank you for bearing with my Robert's Rules newness. Currently, the motion is to approve this CUP with an additional recommendation that the school board consider adding EV stations at a number that is reasonable based on the site. So all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right. This CUP has been passed tonight. Thank you. And so with that, we will go on to our second one, which again, Community Development Director Carrie Teague will be presenting.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Same request, a little smaller, well, much smaller scope. So this is Concord Elementary, located east of Highway 100 along Concord Avenue. Aerial look at the site. So the proposal here is to add 1 classroom. So here is a look at the site itself. A little tough to make out, but you can see the perimeter of the site with the school here, parking field to the west and to the east. The addition would be located right here. So this graphic shows the 1 classroom addition that's proposed. So again, because there is an increase in the number of classrooms, the conditional use permit is triggered. The setbacks are all met with the location of the structure of the addition. In terms of the number of parking stalls, they're code compliant. They're not making any changes to the parking fields. Traffic patterns all remain the same. So again, conditional use permit criteria, staff believes that it is met here. Again, just that minor 1 classroom addition, and there shouldn't be any major impacts to traffic, parking, all of those things. So with that, staff is recommending approval of this conditional use permit, subject to the findings, again, and conditions that are outlined in the staff report. With that, I can stop and answer questions.
Thank you, Director Teague. We're getting some feedback. All right, thank you for your presentation. We will open it up for any questions directly for Director Teague. Otherwise, I will invite back up the school team to make any additional presentation for this proposal. Any questions for Director Teague? All right, please come back up.
All right, so for Concord, we alluded to this previously, but really the main intent behind this addition is to create additional special education space and then a flexible classroom for the school to have as an option for their capacity as it ebbs and flows. That special education space, really the intent is to provide special services for students. They see an increased population, and we're creating a pretty specialized space that can serve those students' needs, specifically at the elementary school. And I really think in this case that summarizes the intent behind the project. I will just add one comment. It is actually a 2-classroom addition. It's just 2 stories. So as you see that stacked in those elevations, there are 2 levels of windows there. So.
All right, thank
Happy
you.
to take any questions.
Very simple. Any questions that we have? Commissioner Smith, kick it off.
Oh, sure. Makes sense. There's some basketball courts, I think, in the front. Would those completely go away? And there's a running path that kind of goes right by the basketball courts. Is that going to also be removed?
I can clarify the basketball courts. Actually, this addition sits on what is currently grass. There are some modifications to the site. I could have mentioned this also, but one other improvement, because this is a special education space, we're actually removing kind of a small, you might call it a small split level that currently exits out where this addition is going, and allows that exit to now be on grade. So that'll be a lot better for students who have mobility needs and just for people who need safety to access the building. The reason I got into that is because what that requires us to do is then create an accessible route outside and make up that grade change, that level change from the building addition to where the site is. But we're including a ramp within the project that meets accessibility and allows students to really easily access the play area, and the basketball courts will not be impacted as part of the project. There's some curb reconstruction and sidewalk that'll be rebuilt just to get the addition constructed and the footings in, but no change to the basketball court. The running path, I guess, Dave, do you know exactly what is being referred to there? I'm not sure I'm clear on where that is, but the sidewalk path will still be maintained.
I don't remember, but I do have my plans back here just
Yeah,
to
we
look real
could-
quick. I'll jump back there and get them.
And I think that if you can move the keyboard too, I think that will function. There should be a camera that will allow us to see where you're indicating. Wonderful. Okay, so what we're doing, as Maria described, we've got the building addition. You guys can see this, right? Yes, we can.
Just want to make sure. We've got the building addition here, and these are just site improvements to accommodate that addition with grading and so on. I actually don't know where the running path is, but I believe we're restoring all of this whole walking sidewalk along this area back so that it's fully functional again.
Gotcha.
For not knowing that, but
Yeah, I think it was the sidewalk.
Okay.
It kind of looped around, so it makes sense. Thanks for showing me that.
Sure.
That helped a ton. Last question really is, it seems like the special education classroom is downstairs and the extension of the kindergarten is upstairs. Just curious why that arrangement, like was there a main reason why we put it downstairs and the kindergarten upstairs?
Yeah, I'd say there's 2 reasons for that. One being the current location of special education programming within the building is on that lower level. And so we're wanting to create kind of a center-based resource area for them so that there's some collaboration there and support for students can be a little more focused in that zone of the school. And then the second reason I already kind of alluded to is the accessibility and the access. So it's really great for those students to be able to come in on grade, again, get to their other existing classrooms as well as other classrooms they'd be accessing, but they have that way to get to and from the site then with a drop-off area that they can access directly.
Thank you.
And there are already kindergarten classrooms on the upper level as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, so we will go ahead and open up our public hearing then for this. I would like to ask if there's anyone in person. No, okay. So we will now hear from residents who would like to provide testimony remotely. To participate, call in now at 888-504-7949 and enter participant passcode 714934. and press star 1 to speak. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they've gone over 3 minutes. And remember, it is not necessary to provide testimony if you have already provided comments via voicemail or bettertogether@edina.org. And so with that, I will look over and see if we have any callers tonight.
We do not have any callers right now.
All right, we will give it 1 minute for those who may be watching virtually and need a minute to call in. All right, seeing that we have no callers tonight, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the public hearing portion has been closed. I will now open it up for any additional comments from fellow commissioners. Commissioner Miranda.
Same comments as the previous requests, and for the same reasons. I'd just like to add that the concern here is not with staff parking or even parking at all. The concern is that the school district is actively encouraging parents to drive their students to school and not put their children on a bus, which is far more efficient than a car and is in fact the transit that we already have, so we don't need new transit lines in this area. The district really needs to think much more broadly about what it means to change how students get transported or transport themselves to our schools. And this is what the IPCC reports mean when they talk about transformational change. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Any additional comments? Commissioner Alkire.
I'd just say, as a resident and a parent of kids that have gone through EPS, I'm happy to see the school district investing in special education. And I've always been impressed by the level of service that we provide, and I know it's never enough, but I like to see that we're spending money on it and trying to improve the facilities available in that. And it seems convenient, since there didn't seem to be other comments, to offer a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Concord Elementary School, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Second.
All right. Any other comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right. Thank you so much. This one has been approved as well. Thank you for coming in tonight. So tonight we do not have any reports or recommendations. So we will move on to our chair and member comments. So I will open it up to anyone who would like to start. Commissioner Alkire.
I wanted to thank Commissioner Miranda for his comments tonight. It really made me think about something that I hadn't thought too much about before. And for what it's worth, this week I'm going to send a letter to Dr. Stanley suggesting that the school should be, as a major user of energy and contributor with buses and buildings, or vehicles and buildings more generally. It's a little bit shocking to me that I can search their website and not find anything having to do with responsibility for climate in that organization. And I think we can do better than that. So thank you for pointing that out. I hadn't really thought about it.
I'll echo that. I think it's a really important question of not only, obviously we have our climate action plan that was adopted earlier this year for the city, but where are there additional pieces of the city that could be thinking about that and adopting something similar? And I think that it's evident that there are very tangible things that the school district as a whole could do. So thank you for your comments.
Sure. Thank you. I'd just like to add, as someone who is trained as a scientist, I'm reading these so the big IPCC report came out in 2018, but there have been a series of reports since then, and it's an ongoing thing. And I read these with more and more alarm, and they use more and more alarming language in each subsequent report. And now they're literally saying transformational change. And there's a guidebook for policymakers. And I don't know if anybody reads this, but it's dense and it's government language, but it's just an immense problem. And I don't think anybody at any level of government is really working at the level it needs to. So, thank you.
Commissioner Padilla, yeah.
Commissioner Miranda and to everybody else, and your comments are certainly well-intentioned and well-made, and I think there's nothing that will make the school district change faster or sooner than if some of these conditional use permits don't get approved. So in a way, I mean, in respect to what you're saying, it's almost like, well, shame on us then if we should be doing more. And maybe this comes as we I'm still getting familiar with the work groups and things like that, and all this climate change that the city is putting into place and emphasizing and things like that. And maybe part of the hierarchy and the questions and the criteria that we develop is that unless we're seeing this, we don't just have one dissenting vote. We need to have more. So.
Well, and I think that's where, the item that I had listed here to discuss tonight was our work plan, right? And I think that the climate actions that we were given in our report is a really great place to start. And I really encourage everyone to comb through that. And I think hopefully at our next Planning Commission meeting, I would love to start with that brainstorming list of what are all of the potential things that we could see ourselves as a Planning Commission taking on next year. And I love the idea of even having a theme, right, of how are we leaning into each of those items. Well, no, not everyone, because there was 35 or 40 of them, but in just this list alone, and I know that there's 200 actions that were, I think, identified in by the full task force. So yeah, what can we do, and what should we be adding to our work plan, and how can we set those expectations and really require it more from what we see?
Just to add some comment to it as well, I think it's only going to change if the requirements for the conditional use permit does have that as a requirement. Folks who come today, they're just meeting the needs that we set, right? We ask them for a conditional use permit, here are the 5 or 6 criteria that needs to be met, staff goes through it, they check all the boxes, and they meet the requirements and they get through. If we want to add on top of that a requirement of some climate action type change, which I fully support, it has to be part of the criteria for the conditional use permit. And that I think would have to come, I'm not exactly sure, but it has to definitely flow from City Council all the way down to being a requirement, and then we can hold folks accountable to it. I like where we're going, where we're pushing it. We're getting some dissenting voices, right? Because we're basically voicing that we need this as part of what we do in the city. We just now have to codify that as part of the requirements to lock it in. So I think that's probably what maybe some of the work plan items could be for us to put that in there. So then going forward, when folks have the criteria, and this is one of them, we will know if they meet it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, the Climate Action Plan talks about such things, and for example, establishing zoning ordinances and incentives guiding future growth, into options which increase density of existing developed land. We'll have, oops, I'm reading the wrong thing. Where'd that go? Establishing zoning ordinances and incentives. So the whole, the whole ordinances is where these conditional use requirements are put in, right? So, I don't know how we go about looking through the entire list of ordinances and figuring out what needs to be done, and then figuring out exactly what needs to be done. Like, what would we say here, right? So I was citing kind of bigger picture things like the comprehensive plan and health and safety, but yeah, that's a good point. And then, oh, good.
I was going to follow up with a question. I mean, since we were on the subject, what is the climate action plan's view of EVs generally?
So, I mean, they're positive on it, right? We have goals. Increase battery electric vehicle utilization to 25% of community-wide rolling stock. Okay, so, which is strategy TL4. So they have a list of strategies that we can do and everything. So that's certainly one of them. But what I was trying to emphasize was that when I said, when I was talking about transformational change and how the school district thinks about how students get to school, it's not just EVs. EVs is not going to solve the problem, right? So it's a component of it, but it's not going to solve it itself. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious too if that report that you suggested, maybe that's even something that you could email out to the planning commissioners, but does that provide within those policy recommendations, because if anyone here read it, it might have been you, is there like a stacked rank of these are the things that have the biggest benefit that we should then potentially be taking in and prioritizing?
Yeah, because it's talking to a worldwide audience, it's very general. And so they don't really have like top 10 things you can do or, something like that. I mean, I wish it did. It's almost like they need to do something. But the way these are approved is that, I forget the exact details. I think the policymaker one, each one gets approved in a different way. Some of them are approved by all the scientists and government officials on the commission, line by line. So like everybody across the world would have to approve it. So it's hard to get real specific things because, everyone around the world is so different. So it's pretty general, but the language they use is just getting more and more dramatic. So.
Well, and I think then that tells me, right, the one really good place to start is obviously the actions that have been defined by the task force. Right. And so I guess homework assignment, right? Like read through all of those and really start to brainstorm. As I was reading through, some refer to how our materials from construction sites required to be recycled. Where are there areas that we can lean in as they're in our purview? And I think this is where, maybe it ends up being a conversation that we have with city staff as well of there was some, consideration applied to which of the two. There were two items, I think, that were potentially planning commission. But Carrie, I'd love to hear your insight, and I'm not putting you on the spot now for it, but kind of going through there and from your experience, which ones could be within our purview as a planning commission as well.
Sure. Just to add to that too, in the engineering reports that we get, usually the last two rows of that report has something to do with a recommended EV station or a recommended solar.
There's a sustainability piece
yes,
at
yes,
the end of
yes.
the engineering report.
But it's recommended. It's not like a permit or something, right? It's not solid. Those are the type of things I think has to become solid, and then we'll start seeing folks come forward with all their plans in front of us, So I'm excited by that. I really think, Lou, you're really touching on something really important that we have to drive. But I'm just trying to think about lifting the weight off of us a little bit and putting it as part of a policy for when you get these permits approved. Might be an easier way for us to get it over the fence.
Right, I'm just trying to push the envelope because it takes years to get that sort of stuff done. So one last thing I'd like to say in terms of climate change is that, if any of you drive around down up Prance Avenue past 42nd Street, and you would have seen the what's been done to our neighborhood, which, the city recently bought some land from the city of Minneapolis Water Public Works, and it was a forest. Now, I want to say I agree with what the city is doing. I think it's necessary what the city is doing because they're trying to, one of the ways you address climate change is amelioration, and that's what they're trying to do, so that we have a lot of water in our neighborhood, which is Morningside, and so they've dug up like the entire park and the wooded area, and they're making water features out of that. It's going to be an amenity. It's a good thing that the city is doing. But this is the level of change that we're having to do to ameliorate climate change, and we're just at the beginning. It's just going to get worse and worse. So unless we want this sort of thing to happen to all our neighborhoods, it's good to do more than just amelioration. You also want to prevent carbon being released into the atmosphere. So, and then to change subjects completely, since we talked about work plan and who's responsible, Jimmy and I are responsible for the ADU portion of it. And I must say, Commissioner Smith has been doing an awful lot of work on it and helping setting up meetings and leading some of them. But we had a meeting this week. We've been meeting every other week with city staff. And Addison in particular has been super helpful. Everyone has, but Addison meets with us every 2 weeks, and we just had a meeting this week, and we're going through and coming up with lots of questions and answers about how ADUs could be beneficial to the city of Edina. So we've been working through that.
I want to go back to the trees. So maybe not back to trees, but back to the climate change and thinking about, things that our city is doing, because I also want to share my appreciation. I live on Pamela Park, and they just planted, I didn't count, but it felt like maybe 40. Don't quote me on that number, but it felt like a lot of trees that they just planted within the last 2 weeks in that park. And I'm so excited that they added trees, and then it's going to add some coverage over the sidewalk. I walk those sidewalks every week. So I like seeing things like that, and I am appreciative of the impact that the city is making of intentionally adding trees. And I know that they have a really large program of the number of trees that they want to plant across the city on an annual basis. So that is one thing that it's great to have that visual reminder and indicator of what we are doing and advancing as a city.
And just to build on that a little bit, to connect with the two of you were just talking about, we have a goal for increasing the canopy in Edina, the tree canopy, and we just cut down a bunch of trees in Morningside, which took us in the wrong direction in a pretty significant way. So every time, I'm totally with you too, Lou, that's a great, we needed to do that. But we just cut down a whole bunch of trees. We're going to have to replace all of them before we get back to zero on our canopy goals as a city. So it's everywhere. It's everything we do is either taking us in the wrong direction or the right direction, it seems like.
Just trying to celebrate some of the steps forward. No, I'm really excited about the trees, and I know it happened in really close time proximity to that as well. And so it is clear to see, yes, we had to take these steps back, but we as a city are acknowledging that and taking steps forward. Any other comments tonight? All right, I will pass it off to Carrie.
Couple things, and the second one builds off what we were just talking about. But first, city council update. The city council at their last meeting held the public hearing for the interlock conditional use permit. They didn't take action. That'll happen at the next meeting on July 19th. In regard to the work plan, MJ had presented and we've been discussing. So to add on maybe to our homework assignment for all of us, maybe shoot me an email with some of your ideas. I could put together a list of items for us to consider for the work plan. and I can compile that and then bring it back to the Planning Commission. We could do it, well, we could talk about that. We could do it on a regular agenda, either on the 13th or the second meeting. We could do a work session, however you'd like to start that. But my thinking was, why don't I compile a list of everybody's ideas, and then we start the discussion that way.
I'd love to hear everyone's preference on a work plan or a working session versus having the discussion in this forum. But I think that in addition to brainstorming those ideas, I'd love us to do a touch base within whatever meeting we do that in, to track our current progress towards everything as well. Because the one that I am the least connected to has been what we're doing with the sketch plan and the kind of the city process. And I know that we'd made a conscious effort at one point to remove the work sessions because we were seeing low attendance at the work sessions, but really good attendance at our meetings. And so thinking about how could we add items that we need to discuss into this meeting here to ensure that we're getting the most representation that we can. So wanted to provide that context for at least our new members who maybe have never even, I think Commissioner Smith, you went to one work session, and then we had the joint session, Commissioner Padilla, that you were with the City Council. But I would like to hear preferences on if we even just do one working session to really work through kind of current state of work plans as well as brainstorming for next, or if it's something that we want to host within these existing Planning Commission meetings.
I think my preference would be to have a separate work meeting.
Same. I think that would be a great way for us to connect, share ideas, bounce off the ideas off of each other. So I would prefer that as well.
I think we ought to have a separate work session. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but the half-hour gap between the work session and the Planning Commission meeting never made much sense to me. So either we have a 90-minute meeting or just do 6 to 7. Or maybe people like to go off and get a Jimmy John's. I don't know. Maybe that's what I should do instead.
I always come with my Jimmy John's,
Oh,
and
see,
then
so you
sometimes
need a
like
half hour.
You can bring
Or we could get
it
Jimmy
with,
John's
but
delivered.
at this point, it feels, to have it a separate meeting, that way it gets the focus it deserves,
Yeah.
as opposed to an add-on. And then, bring your sandwich.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we have a big agenda on a night and then we're trying to discuss this, we self-regulate, and I don't think, whereas if we have a dedicated time for it, I think we would do it better. I do agree that maybe we went a little overboard on the work sessions like every time, but this I think is important enough for it. Yeah.
Okay, I think that sounds good then. Let's work to schedule that. And then Carrie, is there any logic that we're not thinking through in why there was that half-hour gap scheduled?
Yeah, it's just to give us time to come down from upstairs into the council chambers, get ready for the next meeting. The council does that also, but they also run right up until 7 o'clock sometimes. So, maybe if we tried to end 10 minutes before the scheduled meeting time, get done at 10 to 7 and get down here, that should give us enough time.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any other items?
That was it for me.
All right. I lost my agenda. Okay. All right, that was it. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I also move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.